tomorrow.
Thank you,
Okay,
Chuck.
so we have a lot of fantastic interest here in the audience, and without further ado, Jan, I'm going to turn you back over to the host role so you can share your presentation and we'll make this thing happen. Okay.
Okay, thanks, Chuck, Tisa, Deborah, and Joanne. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, very good. Well, it's really nice to be here. I'm Jan Spencer, and I am on the West Coast here in Eugene, Oregon. And this is a presentation that is brought to you by Simply Living Columbus, Ohio. Great to know that your organization exists. Simply living is a pretty important topic, and it's one that I spend a good bit of time on myself. So this is a presentation about transforming suburbia. I live in a suburban house. The picture you see right there is my backyard, and it's a mid-50s suburban house in a suburban neighborhood. My ideals for my presentation is we just have to pick up the pace for social, political, economic transformation towards a society and a civilization that planet Earth can sustain. My primary ideals, goals, living within the boundaries of the natural world and having a society whose ideal also is to bring out the best and positive human potential. And we desperately need an economic system that is honest, accountable, and serves the healthy goals of society. And another ideal is, of course, the repair, the restoration of the natural world. So the contents for today's presentation, I want to say something about the American lifestyle is non-negotiable. I'll spend some time with some show and tell of pictures of my own property. I have lots of before and now photos. I want to show and tell a little bit in my neighborhood, and I want to show a little bit of some of the allies and opportunities we have in our neighborhood, and probably almost any neighborhood has some of these allies and assets and opportunities as well. And I'll say a few things about the bigger picture, and then a slide that'll show some of the conclusions. Several people have claimed this quote, among them Donald Rumsfeld, former Defense Secretary, "The American way of life is non-negotiable." And what that says to me is that the people in control are not going to negotiate about all the money they're making off of the current economic system. And they want suburbia, they want the consumer culture to continue because they make a lot of money from it. And what happens to public health and the well-being of the natural world is not so important to these people. But as we'll see, and as many of you certainly know, there are alternatives, there are other choices to be made. This picture here is from Google, and I've identified the properties. What you see here are the fuchsia colored rectangles. Those are permaculture friendly properties in my neighborhood nearby. And the yellow rectangle is my house, that's my property. So I have goals here at my own property. When I bought this place 20 years ago, the intention from the start was to do a permaculture makeover. I had no hesitation about what the idea was, why I was buying this property. The property is a very good property for doing the kinds of projects I wanted to do. I knew what I was looking for, and this property was a good fit. And the goals are to reduce my eco footprint and to produce more of my basic needs here on site. Also, this place is a wonderful educational resource, not only for myself, but for the thousands of people who have visited here over the years. And another very important goal is the aesthetics. of the place and the enjoyment of just living here, of enjoying where I spend a lot of my time. This image here is a graphic of my property. You can see in the purple, the outline, that's actually the house. And the long axis of the house runs east-west. That's the best kind of orientation that you want for solar gain. The north is on the right side of this graphic. So you can see right next to the main house, the garage, the living space, you can see the sunroom. That used to be an outdoor patio that's closed in now. It's a passive solar space. Up in the left-hand corner, you can see the bungalow. That's where I am at this moment. This is a structure I built. You can also see gardens. You can see rainwater catchment. You can see elevated edible landscaping. So there's a lot going on here. And again, this is 20 years worth of work. And I have had the opportunity to put a lot of time into this because I could focus on this project. And it's been one of the best experiences of my life. I love living here, and it's great to just look out my window. And as Chuck mentioned, permaculture is a tool for designing systems for taking care of human needs in ways that are friendly to people and planet. That's the short definition of permaculture that I like. It's not only a gardening tool. You could design an economic system. You could design an entire civilization based on permaculture principles. We could sure use that. If you aren't familiar with permaculture, there's plenty online. You can look up permaculture and there's videos and explanations. Permaculture is a wonderful tool. This picture here is from the street, and this is what the front of my house looks like right now. And you can see in the upper right-hand corner, there's a picture. This is what my property looked like when I moved in. Like I said, it's a mid-50s suburban house. It's a small suburban house and only had a one-car garage. You can see that here. But I've made lots of changes, but this is currently what you see when you're on the street looking at my property. So let's go back in time just a little bit. One of the first projects I did was to take out the driveway. The driveway had space for parking 6 cars. I don't need that space. I am a critic of automobiles. They take up far too much room. And I didn't need to have a big slab of concrete there in front of my house. So a friend and I rented a cement saw. Neither one of us had did this before. We sliced up the driveway. My friend took some of the chunks. That's what's happening right here. You can see about this size. That's a pretty big chunk right there. Fortunately, the driveway didn't have any rebar in it. So this picture here is maybe 10 or 12 years ago. And you'll see in the following pictures, you'll see this red line like that, like that. That red line will show up in a couple of the following slides to give you some orientation. This is what the space looks like now. Here's that red line again. This is what's left of the driveway. And here we are up here again, of course. So I have a shed over here. I have a grape trellis where you enter into the property. I have a lot of elevated landscaping. We'll have some more pictures of the elevated landscaping. Of course, the front yard garden is over here. And back here, this is where the garage was. This is all closed in because the garage was turned into a living space. So this is looking back from the previous picture. This is looking back in the direction of the previous picture. Here again, that's the sidewalk. That's the remains of the driveway. And this is the front yard garden. This is what the front yard used to look like. If you can remember that far back, this is a Ralph Nader for president lawn sign right here. So that dates this right at 2000 right there. So a lot's happened since then. So another important ideal I have is reclaiming automobile space. And what you have here is a picture of what my one-car garage looked like when I moved in. And this is what we turned it into, just a totally simple, nothing special remodeling of turning a garage into a living space. Nothing complicated here at all. This is, of course, the south-facing wall, and I found a really nice 8-foot slider, so I get a little solar gain from here. But let me just mention that I have a series of presentations I'm doing that I put out on chat, a link you can find out about those presentations. A presentation about a month from now is totally about pushing back on cars, what people are doing all over the world, pushing back on cars. I'm going to do a whole presentation on that. The info is on my website. But this image here and my driveway are my own examples of pushing back on cars. I've turned a car place into a comfortable living place. This is what the backyard used to look like when I moved in. Somebody had actually closed in the patio and turned it into a solar space. That was a really good idea. It was not a very well done job. A friend and I rebuilt it about 15 years ago. But the idea of taking a space like a south side of the house patio and turn it into a passive solar space, a lot of properties could do this. Not every property is oriented this way, but a lot of them are. The point being that almost any suburban property has a lot of potential for producing more of what needs are on site. So I get a lot of energy out of this passive solar space.
Oh, I can make one.
So this is a picture of what my backyard looks like now. And you can see the previous picture right here, and that becomes this backyard right here. You can see the solar space is rebuilt. I immediately had solar hot water heater. Somebody's could please mute. That would be helpful. Solar hot water heater here. I put a Galvalume roof on my house. You can see this. This is not a shingle roof. Galvalume is perhaps the best kind of a roof to have on your house if you want to catch rainwater, especially if you want to drink that rainwater. I don't drink my rainwater, but having a Galvalume roof is an important part of a very usable rainwater catchment system. I'll say a little bit more about rainwater in a minute. This is another view of the backyard. This is looking south. And you can see the upper right-hand corner. That's what my backyard looked like pretty much when I moved in. That's what it looked like. And this is what it looks like now because I've done a lot of landscaping. The property didn't have so much landscaping. I took out almost everything that was already existing and replaced it with what you see here. This is a small olive tree right here. This is a lemon tree over here. These are the tops of some peach trees. This is a filbert tree. I've got edible landscaping just everywhere here. The Pacific Northwest has quite an attractive climate. We are a Mediterranean climate, and we can grow lots of fruit, lots of vegetables here. It's a wonderful climate. It's sunny all the time in the summertime. So this is a picture of the structure I'm in. At this moment, I'm right back in here. And this is an old shed that was existing on the site. You can see this telephone pole here. This is the same telephone pole as there is right there. Another important goal for the property was to increase the residential density. If you're acquainted with kind of city speak, almost every city in the country, other than Manhattan and maybe San Francisco, wants to increase the density of habitation so we don't have to sprawl out into the surrounding countryside. And suburbia offers itself as a very important way to make better use of the space we're already impacting. So I built this. This is where I live, and I rent 3 rooms in my house. So there are 4 people who live on this property. And again, a big part of the idea is to reduce our ecological footprints. So this is inside. You talk about aesthetics. Someone else would have designed something different perhaps for this particular location, but I've designed and built this place myself. And I do have, you can see, there's glass up in the ceiling, there's passive solar design. And so I do get partial solar help with heating this place. But of course, this doesn't heat my place in the wintertime because it's too chilly and cloudy. But it's a wonderful location. I'm sitting here at this moment and I look out on the backyard. Here's the sunroom here. So you get a little bit of an idea of the aesthetics of this place. It really resonates. I sure enjoy the place. Another early project was a rainwater catchment system. I bought these 2 tanks here, this one and this one. I bought these used from a tank business in a town nearby, and I've hooked those up. Nothing fancy here at all. My property's flat, so I don't need to pump water. I just need to elevate these tanks a little bit so that water just runs out naturally. I use the rainwater to for irrigation, especially these 2 tanks right here. This is the front yard tank. This is a backyard tank. About 10 years ago, I bought another tank. This is a 3,000 gallon tank. And just so you know, a 3,000 gallon tank is about 8 feet high and about 8 feet in diameter. That's 3,000 gallons. And the water for this tank comes off the roof of that structure I showed you where I'm living in right now. And this tank is actually food grade plastic. You can drink the water from this tank. It hasn't anything to leach into the water. Of course, you still need to clean up the water. You need to filter the water. And I do drink water out of this tank right here. But it's largely because I like the idea of having water on site. If you think that you're going to save money by catching rainwater and using your rainwater instead of your city water, it's going to take a long time to pay off those tanks because most city water is so tragically underpriced. But there's more reasons to having water on site than simply saving money. I don't save much money at all on these tanks, but if there's a disruption, it's nice to have water on site. And I know how much water my garden needs in the summertime now too. So taking care of more needs on site and being actively involved creates a lot more respect and appreciation for what it takes for satisfying our needs. And having a very permaculture site like this has taught me an enormous amount over the years. Absolutely. So here's inside the sunroom here. I just took this picture today. And it's a wonderful place. Just again, it's the aesthetics. This is kind of summer mode. I put lots of plants in here in the wintertime. Most of those are still outside. And but here's a couch, just a really nice place just to chill out. And then this fan circulates warm air from the sunroom into the rest of the house. So that's a good part of my passive heating system right there. My place also is a community asset. I've literally had thousands of people visit over the years. I'm not shy about my place. I think this is one of the smartest actions a person can take. Of course, not everybody has a suburban house, but a lot of people do, because about half of all Americans live in suburbia. And also have to add another caveat. My neighborhood here, where I live, in this part of town, in the Pacific Northwest, the city is pretty easygoing. I've never had any static from the city for doing any of this. This is probably one of the most AA bond rating suburban locations in the country right here. I've lived in suburbia in Dallas, Texas. I've lived in suburbia in Houston, Texas, and there's enormous potential in those places, but it's simply not as good as this. It's one of the reasons I moved here. But these are all people, classes, workshops, to come and see what suburbia might look like. And a little quick jump ahead, there are a couple dozen other properties within a 10-minute bike ride of my house that are doing different parts of what I'm doing. So we'll have a look at some of those locations too. I'm not the only person around here doing this kind of suburban permaculture transformation. Far from it. But this is the Suburban project as part of a larger lifestyle, and a presentation that I'm going to do actually tomorrow night. And once again, you can access that Zoom information from my website, but it's called One Earth Living. What would our economy, what would our lifestyles look like if we lived a One Earth lifestyle? That's a little bit theoretical, but if we actually lived within the boundaries of the natural world and we weren't creating climate change and microplastics and all the other havoc that humans are imposing on the planet, what would a lifestyle, what would a civilization, what would an economy look like that lived within its ecological boundaries? That's kind of hard to say, but we sure don't have it right now. But what you see here are several aspects of, safe to say, a much more downsized lifestyle. For example, being vegetarian is a wonderful way to reduce one's ecological footprint, just our food choices, especially if you grow a good deal of food yourself. Alternatives to the automobile. It's hard to live without a car, absolutely. Well, it's designed that way. We have the captains of industry want you to need a car. That's why we have suburbia. And this picture right here, one of my favorite, I put my bike in a box and on Amtrak, and I took the bike to Tucson, and I rode my bike on back roads from Tucson to El Paso. And it's a wonderful, wonderful trip. This is about 50 miles west of Bisbee, Arizona right here. Mexico is pretty close here. But this illustrates a pretty small eco footprint, kind of a vacation. And of course, not everybody wants to do this, but I sure do. And it's a good example of a minimal eco footprint of adventure, exercise, fun, of seeing a semi-desert part of the country. But these and other aspects of a One Earth lifestyle just make more and more sense as time goes on. So it's great to do all these projects on an individual house, but the scale has to increase a lot more than that. We need to be having suburban permaculture. This really needs to be kind of the normal instead of here and there and kind of an odd story. This needs to be happening all over. Well, this is my next door neighbor right here. And he and I agreed we wanted to get rid of this laurel hedge. This was maybe 12 or 14 years ago. The hedge was right on the property line. Neither one of us could take it out on our own. So we agreed to take out the laurel hedge. And this is, the hedge is gone. And we put up a fence, and we both now have edible landscaping on our respective sides of the fence. We could not have done the hedge removal on our own. It took a collaboration between two neighbors who couldn't have done it by themselves, but when they work together, then they can accomplish tasks you can't do on your own. So that's just kind of a little morality story right there when we learn to have cooperation with our friends and neighbors. It puts a lot more into reach for taking care of the needs that we all have. So this is, it's kind of a food tunnel. I have trellising here and various kinds of shrubs and mulberry and almond and blackberries. So this is kind of early going right here. But it's just a good little story of cooperating with neighbors. So speaking of neighbors, we're going to shift now from my house to a little further away. And again, this is the same picture as before. We're going to visit a few of these locations. We'll visit here, we'll visit here, we'll have a look over the fence here. So I just want to give you a little bit of an idea of some of the what goes on in my neighborhood. And this is not at all to say we're doing it here, everything is the way it should be, far from it. But it's great that there is an appreciable number of other people in the neighborhood nearby who are also into this kind of not just transforming the property, but also the bigger picture of transforming the society. That's a big part of the interest among permaculture types here in my neighborhood. So this is next door. It was this fellow here, Bill. We took out the hedge. Bill and I took out the hedge. He had a gravel driveway that went to his garage in his backyard. He had the driveway dug out and replaced with garden soil. So this picture here became this picture here. It's the same place a few years later. And this picture here, I just took just today. I have some new neighbors who bought this house over my backyard fence, and their plan is to do a substantial permaculture makeover of their backyard. And what they did here is they put out some cover crop and some nutrients to start moving the soil into a garden kind of direction. These are next door neighbors. I'm really feel glad that people with this kind of interest, you know, are sharing nearby space with me. And this picture is a park just down the street, just 6 houses down the street. We have bike tours here. We've been doing bike tours for 15 years here in my neighborhood to show and tell what people are doing at home. We would visit a place like Bill. Bill was very much into bees, and we'd ask people here and Heiko's house here, the person who owns the property would be there and they'd explain what they're doing with their property. So people do different kinds of projects. Heiko has this front yard food forest that if you didn't know what a food forest was and just looked at it, you were wondering, what's this guy doing here? His next door neighbor, you can't see, but over here has a whole different kind of front yard food production going. I don't have a picture of his place, but it tends to be when you do something in the front yard, if you turn a front yard into a garden or do something very visible, it puts that action into a public place, and it tends to make other people consider doing that yourself. All over the place, the neighborhood in Eugene, if there's a permaculture front yard, it's not surprising that there's other people nearby who are doing something like that too, because most people, of course, it never occurs to them to turn their front yard into a garden. But that's why we like to have these site tours to show and tell what suburbia can be. This is one site tour. This woman who lives here was using the space of her next door neighbor for a garden. The ant farm, a suburban CSA, community supported agriculture. A fellow lives a few blocks away. Beautiful cob greenhouse. This is really artistic. So we're having a site tour and we're checking out. He's got a big mass stove inside his house too. This is my friend Sandra. She has done just beautiful with her backyard a few blocks away. Here's another location just a couple blocks away. This is a big straw bale structure here. And Dharmalaya even has a website. They do a lot of yoga training here. We've had permaculture here. We've had all kinds of events. It just happened that Ravi and Michelle moved in within a year of I moved in. We didn't know each other, but the same kind of a vision. This is inside the straw bale structure. A number of years ago, the city of Eugene hosted a neighborhood association conference here in Eugene, Neighborhoods USA, where people from different neighborhoods all over the country and cities all over the country, they meet and have a conference to talk about what they're doing to make their neighborhoods better places to live. Eugene hosted that conference about 6 years ago, and the host city creates tours in the city to show people what's happening in the city. And we offered a tour of permaculture in our neighborhood, and a lot of people came on that tour. Roanoke, Virginia, Birmingham, Alabama, all over the place. They had never seen anything like what they saw on that tour. And then, of course, it was our privilege to put together a really nice dinner for the people who were on the tour. And we did that over here at Dharmalaya. So it was great to have these people from all over the country go back to where they live and be able to say, wow, you should see what people are doing in Eugene, Oregon, because this needs to be normal all over the place. Here's another property just a couple blocks away, and this is what Vistara looked like early going. This is the same location right here, all covered in blackberries. We had a lot of work parties. This is kind of a little micro eco village at this point, and we've had different types of community events here. The village garden parties. We've had different kinds of classes in this structure here about gardening and about eco living. So this has become a popular place in the neighborhood for socializing and also for education to advance the idea of living more ecological, one earth lifestyles and building community. So there's lots of other properties in the neighborhood, but what I'd like to do here is identify some of the allies, assets, and opportunities in the neighborhood that almost any neighborhood is going to have some of this, and maybe you're making use of some of these yourself. But I think it's important to point out that if we're going to see the kind of world many of us would like to see, we're going to have to make a lot of new friends and engage them and explain why living within our ecological means is such an important idea to elevate the human spirit. So there's lots to work with in any neighborhood or any town. So entity number one is our neighborhood association. Eugene has a neighborhood program, and our neighborhood has a neighborhood association. I'm on the board. When people are involved with their neighborhood association, they can help make the agenda. Typically, a neighborhood association has a public meeting once a month, and they have a program. We've had programs. This is a program, Creating Resilient Neighborhoods was one of our programs. Typically, a neighborhood association has some kind of a way to put out information to the neighborhood. We put out a newsletter a couple years ago that talked all about urban homesteading and permaculture. This went out to 8,000 addresses in our neighborhood. So many cities have neighborhood programs. Not every city does, but even if your city doesn't, you can create your own neighborhood association as well. You might get some help from the city, and maybe you could encourage your city to actually start a program. I can't think of a better program for a city. This empowers people. It builds community and civic culture. I can't say enough about neighborhood associations. because I'm involved with my neighborhood association, I am familiar with a lot of the land use. This is my neighborhood here. I'm back over here. This is where I'm located, somewhere back behind this. But this is the Willamette River, and this is greenway along the river. This is public property along the river. There's a bike path on both sides of the river, the entire eastern boundary of my neighborhood association. The city can't take care of all of this. So what we're doing is people in the neighborhood are basically adopting different sections of the greenway, and we actually have written agreements with the city about expectations that they have for us to improve the well-being of that particular site along the greenway in terms of removing invasive species, in terms of upgrading the well-being of the natural environment along here. My space is the Filbert Grove right here, and this is the Filbert Grove. It's a 65-tree Filbert Grove that predates the greenway. And this used to be private property, and we've restored the Filbert Grove. So I know about this stuff because I'm involved with my neighborhood association. I know what kind of programs the city has that we can use to leverage to advance the agenda that we have, which may not be the same agenda that the city has, but we can use mainstream assets to advance, how could I say, a more ambitious agenda. So this is another pictures of the greenway. We work with the city. It's important to be able to work with the city and know how the city works. This is the next level up in the kind of hierarchy, because it's great to get this kind of activity in our neighborhoods, but it needs to rise up into the realm of the city, and with enough people to state level and maybe even national level. The final presentation I'm going to do in my Zoom series is, I'm calling it the new movement that already exists. I'll say a little bit more about that in a few minutes, but this is a work party in the Filbert Grove. A church youth group came to help us in the Filbert Grove. This is a Razor Park, and we're planting natives in Razor Park. And my good friend Becky looks after this, have work parties. Great way to accomplish an important task, but also make friends. This is building community and civic culture right here. We have a rec center in my neighborhood, and it's not a City of Eugene rec center. The City of Eugene has outdoor programs, recreation centers, but this is our own park district right here. This is just a few blocks from where I live. This is the website, and this picture shows an aerial view of the rec center. A rec center is there as a community resource, and oftentimes they'll have programs. Pretty much anybody can teach anything they want at the rec center. It can be put on a schedule, and that catalog goes out to everybody in the neighborhood. A rec center can be a wonderful place to use the classrooms, the open space outside, a great asset to use for advancing the ideas of living more ecologically responsible. And we've done a fair amount of that. This picture here, this is inside the rec center here. They have a big multi-purpose room. This is a map of part of the outside of the rec center. This is one of their classrooms. Our neighborhood hosted the 2015 Northwest Permaculture Convergence at our rec center. To my knowledge, and I'd love to be wrong on this, this is the only permaculture convergence I've ever heard of that was actually held in a suburban neighborhood. We had people from out of town camping out in the backyards. We had a host position of all the tasks we had to do. One person's task was to match people from out of town with a place to camp in somebody's backyard in the neighborhood. worked out really well. We had site tours. This is a pizza oven in somebody's yard. We brought a lot of people from different neighborhoods together. But the take-home message here is that a rec center can be a wonderful place to share with the community the ideas of living more ecologically and, I would say, socially responsible. So we've had other events here at our rec center too. This was just one of them. This is a new story here. A church in my neighborhood is hosting a garden for the NAACP, the Eugene NAACP. And I have nothing to do with this project at all, but obviously a lot of work has gone into it. So this is a big garden for the group. But the point here is that lots of churches have assets they can share with the neighborhood. Maybe you don't have a rec center in your neighborhood, but most neighborhoods have a church or a temple or some kind of place for communities of faith. And they are normally pretty welcoming for interaction with the community and might have space that they would share with a community group to use as a place to have workshops or classes. And you know, there are a good number of denominations. I'm thinking of Unitarians, the Anglicans, perhaps others, actually oftentimes have social concerns committees in the church of people in the church or the synagogue or the temple who already have an existing interest in social justice, in the environment, in peace. And these are natural allies to connect with. And so the message here is that communities of faith can be wonderful allies to go meet and make common cause with. Every neighborhood has churches, synagogues, temples, places where people, the ideal is to elevate the spirit, you know, to serve the community, and they can be allies as well. I have a big interest in urban land use. And what you see here is a big strip mall that's about a mile from where I live. I go shop here on occasion, not too often, but I do go up here. And my dentist is actually right in here. But when you look at a typical strip mall and just all the parking for cars, this is just a tragic use of space. Imagine if this space was reused. Part of the goal of almost any city in the country is to somewhat rework the urban landscape so people don't have to use their cars so much. That's a big deal here in Eugene. Of course, we have plenty of cars and there is some traffic congestion in different places, but imagining what could be done with existing urban infrastructure if a parking lot like this was turned into a little micro downtown. Imagine buildings kind of something like these on the parking lot. So what that can do is it can increase residential density. Say that this building was here. Could increase the residential density because part of that development could be for people to live in apartments. Lots of people live in apartments. That's good. There could be, say, this sort of pedestrian area here might be this interior space here. This could be redeveloped into some place that would be very attractive to live in. You would have different types of professional offices and services that the neighborhood needs that people nearby could access so they don't have to get in their car and go someplace else. That's the whole idea here of reimagining what a parking lot could be. If you were to look on YouTube and look up dead malls, you would find there's some extremely creative projects in the country right now of shopping malls that that have died that are being put to new use. So this is, I'm thinking dead malls, brownfields, and parking lots are the new frontier of urban redesign. And this, of course, could all be done in a more ecologically responsible kind of a way too. And of course, you could have a bus here. We do have a bus on this road right here. You could improve the bike facilities that could feed in to this little micro downtown to get people to take short trips on their bike instead of driving. There's lots of peripheral features. And as I mentioned, the presentation I'm going to do about pushing back on cars will go into more detail about all this, about taking the existing urban landscape and making it much more friendly to people and planet. This picture here is, this is a fairly important street in Eugene. It's not in my neighborhood, but I have this picture here to show that even though right here, there is a bike lane on the side of this street right here, it's still, this is all you have between you and moving traffic. And this isn't a fast street, probably 30, 35 miles an hour. But just imagine if these cars weren't allowed to park on the street, and instead these lanes could be shifted over this way and could open up more space for a two-way bike zone. And then there would be a curb, an actual physical separation between the bikes and the cars. This is just the experience all over the world. When you make bike riding safe, more people will use a bike. And I was just reading an article just today about bike riding in New York City. A lot more women are riding bikes in New York City because, of course, there's less traffic because of the virus, but the city is trying to accommodate safer bike riding. All over the world, there are cities that are using the virus to pop up bike lanes, and the whole idea to reduce the amount of space that automobiles take up. This is a new bike lane, two-way bike lane in Eugene. I was just on this a couple of days ago. It's just opening right now. I celebrate and love to see this between downtown and the University of Oregon. So I know a lot of cities are upgrading their bicycle infrastructure, and they need to be encouraged to do more of that. So just a little summary here of suburbia. Suburbia can be a place for reducing eco footprints and the kinds of community culture that can help repair suburbia can call on the best and positive human potential. I love that term, positive human potential. We have lots of that our consumer culture does not really much like positive human potential because it's not a good audience for selling products to. So producing a lot more basic needs at home and nearby, building community, enjoying where we live, building a more local economy. I've done a lot of work on my house. I've done most of the work myself. And if I had paid somebody to do this work, I would have employed a lot of people to transform my property. And of course, a lot of people have a lot more money than I do, and they can afford to pay somebody. But if you just imagine what you've seen of my property and multiply that times 5 million, 10 million, 40 million suburban houses, that's a lot of economic activity to repair suburbia. That's a big part of my interest, a part of a repair economy. And of course, suburbia is a perfect place for pushing back on capitalism and the consumer culture. And all of these actions are part of moving towards a preferred future. And this picture here, this is a completely make-believe location. This is my house right here. And this is my next door neighbor. Actually, some of this is that one picture you saw. That's kind of like, okay, that's all turned into garden. Several other properties here. This is all permaculture friendly, needs to be put in place. There's a lot of permaculture friendly properties here that I'm sure looking forward to doing the work and actually making the ideas into a reality. But I just used my block right here to give some kind of an idea of what a suburban neighborhood might turn into. You know, like the fences are mostly down, there's nice walkways, food forest, gardens, kids' place. So this is kind of a little bit of an idealized retrofit, kind of a co-housing place right here. So we're kind of on the home stretch here with the presentation. And
I
what
think
I
we
want
need to wrap it up pretty soon. We're almost into 50 minutes, so we want to give you
Yeah.
time for for questions. Go ahead.
Okay, very good. Here are the presentations that I have coming up, and I want to say something short about each one of these that is big picture kind of topic. The One Earth lifestyle, which I've mentioned, is ecological footprint. That's tomorrow, actually. That's October 8th. I'm doing this presentation about reducing ecological footprints. Information on my website. Another important presentation is a critique of market capitalism. What can we do to repair the damage that this economic system has inflicted on people and planet? That's October 22nd. This is a fascinating study right here about market capitalism. And this picture on this presentation on November 5th, pushing back against cars. We'll visit San Francisco, New York City, Barcelona, Spain, Groningen, Denmark, and see what different cities, different countries are doing to reclaim space for people and not so much for cars. That's a great one. Visions Preview of a Preferred Future, November 18th. This is going to be a show and tell of what all kinds of people are doing in all kinds of ways to create a preferred future. And it's not just suburbia, it's urban. We'll learn about block planning, eco-villages, housing co-op in Eugene. So this is November 18th. And this is going to be the final presentation in my series, December 3rd. You can see here environmental, political, public health, social. Market capitalism is the common denominator. Practically any group you know about or involved with for the well-being of people and planet is addressing some issue, some problem that this economic system has caused. What if all those organizations realized they were all on the same team and began to act in a synchronized way? I'll say more about that on December 3rd. That's a big picture item right there. We've got to become a lot more ambitious than our own neighborhoods. And this is the final picture right here. Conclusions and multiple benefits. So transforming a suburban property is good for local business, nurture positive human potential, good for the environment, build a positive culture closer to home, empower people, bring out the best and positive human potential. So I understand that this is going to be recorded. It is, Chuck, and this is going to be on YouTube at some point.
That's right.
Okay, well, that's what I have to say.
Thanks so much, Jan. It's an amazing picture you've painted. I think just my own comment is so exciting to see that this is happening not just out on the edge in Eugene, Oregon, or the West Coast being more progressive, It's happening all over the planet, everywhere. So there's seeds are being sown, and the harvest is coming out slowly from the bottom up as people look at the planet in a different way. And I think all of the examples you gave are terrific for the kind of vision that we can have in Columbus and Central Ohio, and a lot of that is happening, but not necessarily as much as we would like to see in individual neighborhoods. So that said, I thank you very much, and we'll open it up for some questions. I know, Tisa, you've been monitoring the Zoom chat. I see some interesting comments there. Anything you would like to bring out to discuss?
Oh, my goodness. Yeah, just kind of responding to people's comments as we were going along. I had made a positive response. Jan, one of the things that I really enjoyed hearing you talk about, and it's something that I lived on the West Coast for a long time, and churches and other faith-based groups do not have the kind of land that they do here. And just a moment, let me undo my video here. I'm astonished at how much grass there is to mow around a lot of churches in this area. And it really feels to me like such a waste. And I mean, there's not even kids out there playing around. And so I really liked your idea, your suggestion about approaching some of these faith-based communities, particularly when they have an eco-friendly tenant in their thing. Why not? Why not? At least for, start with, the pollinator gardening, and we could work our way into vegetables, a little bit slower. And then folks were also kind of asking a little bit about forming community and with other people in shared ways. I mentioned that my wife and I had looked at co-housing a while back, and I know that that's something that may be more familiar to folks on the West Coast as a concept. I think it's slowly taking hold around the Midwest and the East Coast. But it's a possibility for a lot of folks who want to live in community with other folks and share their resources.
Let me mention, Tisa, can I respond to that for a sec?
Please.
A lot of people think of co-housing as a ground up project that costs $400,000 to get into.
Doesn't have to.
And it doesn't have to be that way. On a couple of my upcoming presentations, I will sort of virtually take us to some places where it is a much less expensive form of co-housing.
Yeah.
Let me just say that.
Yeah, and for a lot of the co-housing places, I know that if people want to start one from scratch, it can be very expensive and very time intensive. But there are also, they've been around long enough in some places that people move and those residents come up for availability. And so there's a lot of different choices in that. And no two co-housing situations are the same. It's that's one of the nice things about it. So.
True.
And there's some questions about how do you deal with neighbors who, especially if you live in an area with a homeowners association that does not necessarily appreciate diversity in lawn approaches, to put it mildly. And that's a really big deal here in the Midwest as well. I lived in the San Francisco Bay Area for about 30 years, and people definitely are a little freer, I think, to do whatever they want out there than they are here in the Midwest. There's a lot more, well, not necessarily, it depends on the neighborhood, but there can be a lot of pressure to maintain a certain neighborhood aesthetic. So.
Well, I know that circumstance exists, but to start small, maybe in the front yard, some fruit trees, maybe a few tomato plants. I know people who have done this sort of incremental approach, and once people start stopping and making friends, then that increases the more or less ownership of the site, and say, hey, you can't take that down. The neighbors like that. So I don't have that issue here, but we got to push back, but try to push back in a responsible and respectable kind of a way as well.
In a respectful way. I mean, people, I think it's an education process a lot of times for other folks, especially older folks, that, this space can have many different uses. I know here where we live, we have ripped out large chunks of our front yard, but we did it in a very deliberate way and in a way that looked like it was intentional and structured. And that's made a huge difference. Zoning, nobody's called zoning on us yet. But we also respect that you have to be set back a certain distance and you have to, maintain sight lines and things like that. So it helps to find out a little bit of what
here's another quick comment about that. If you look at your city's planning documents, even your state's planning documents, if your city has, say, for example, a climate change plan or something like that, or any city has got some ideals to improve air quality, to improve resilience. You might have a city program like Neighborhood Watch or mapping your neighborhood. These kinds of items you've seen in this slideshow complement so many different state and city planning goals. You would be amazed. Look up Columbus, look up Ohio. You might have to get some help finding what you're looking at, but I would almost guarantee you they've got language that if you took that language literally, then the city and the state should be encouraging people to do all of this kind of stuff.
And Columbus is actually making a pretty good effort towards, of anywhere in Ohio, I think really has made a good push towards progressive land use. And I received something today that some of the ag things that the CSAs that are located in town have been pushing for are actually starting to become a possibility, like selling produce from your property and things like that. But somebody had asked on the chat, how long had this process of the permaculture and the neighborhoods and all of that been going on in Eugene? When do you think that really started to take off?
Well, I would say it's a little of an overstatement to say it's really totally taken off. It's not rare, but it's not the usual either. I don't want to make this sound like I live in ecotopia because I don't. But my property that I have is the first place in Eugene that I know about that actually explained or described itself as suburban permaculture. My website is suburbanpermaculture.org. And a person from California, the Yuba Gals, two videographers from California, came here almost 20 years ago to do an interview and a video tour of my place. And that would have been about 16 or 18 years ago. They put that video on YouTube, and it was the first video on YouTube under the title Suburban Permaculture. And you look at suburban permaculture. Now, this is just an idea that millions of people have identified all on their own, because it's just, you don't need to have somebody tell you. You can use that space better. But this is the first place I know of in Eugene. But I have a friend in Houston, Texas, who was initiating a suburban permaculture project on his totally suburban property in Southwest Houston in 1988. Bob Randall started, that's the first suburban permaculture project I ever heard about. And I haven't been there in person, but it's sort of a subtropical food forest now. He's got his on YouTube, Bob Randall, Houston, Texas. It's pretty amazing. So I know people all over the country are doing this too. It's I know all over, just like you're saying. Yeah.
Well, I know that here at the Columbus Garden School, and Deb can probably address this better than I, but we're actually going to start a permaculture class, and it'll be the first time we're offering it here. And it's sort of a general basics class. It's going to go 2 nights, and it starts on, I want to say, Tuesday, October 20th. So if folks are interested in that, come on out to columbusgardenschool.com, take a look at the class listing, see if that's something that you're interested in. But definitely very much it's online, which is, good for everybody, no matter where you are. But yeah, if you're interested in learning more about the specific basics, take a look at the description, see if that's something that you're interested in. There was another question that I thought was good. Somebody had asked, in conventional neighborhoods, property values are a big deal. How has the activity over the years impacted, how has your activity in your neighborhood impacted property values? Or has it?
I would have a hard time saying how it's affected property values nearby. I know that my property value's only gone up over the years, but
Well,
of course
Portland.
that's not unusual either. But I'd be a little shy of responding. What's the effect been on the properties around me? I know that I mentioned Bill, my next door neighbor, who we took the hedge down. He's moved, and some other people have moved in. And Patty, my new next door neighbor, as of about a year, she said when she first came over to take a look at that house for sale and saw next door was my place, she was thrilled. She said, I can't believe how lucky to have something like this going on next door. And the other people over my backyard fence who are just at the beginning of starting their project, I just saw Felicia, the mom, today, and she said, please come over. We do need to get together. I want your ideas on what we can do on my property too. So
And I think value is in the eye of the beholder, you know?
It's exactly right.
Yeah.
Exactly right. Some people love it and some people would not want to see it, for sure. But history is on the side of doing exactly what we're doing here.
I think that's true. I noticed in a comment that someone mentioned that in Columbus, we have a great tree giveaway program. And those of you who subscribe to my community update every Friday, I'll be putting in again the second tree giveaway on October 17th. So that's coming up pretty soon. And that's one step, planting a tree, but they have thousands to give away, and we have a limited tree canopy in Columbus as a result of all the suburban developments. So it's kind of repairing and restoring more of that canopy that we've lost.
Yeah, we are behind in the canopy department, but I will say that after living in Oakland, California, where there was no tax money for things like that, the program that Columbus has put together for giving away trees is phenomenal. And you don't have to be poor, you don't have to be rich, you don't have to be anything. You just got to go over there and get yourself a tree.
Yeah, right.
And I do want to mention something. Columbus is now undergoing a master plan for trying to re-tree the Columbus metropolitan area, Columbus Central first, and then moving on out. I was on a committee that, well, we started in January, end of January, and our our third and fourth meetings were supposed to be in March and April. So we did do them virtually, and it was interesting, but there
Zoom is your friend.
There was a lot of synergy in the room with people from all parts of public life, private life, and government coming together, talking about re-treeing Columbus to cool it down because we're too hot.
Yes, as was evidenced by how many rainstorms went right around us this summer. That is the heat island effect, folks. So those of you who are here on this permaculture call, you're in the right place at the right time. Those of us who live in urban areas, this is really happening. This heat that we're generating that's coming up off all of our hardscape is really having an effect on the water that lands on our lawns and our trees and our shrubs.
I wanted to comment on Jan's reference to the various bike tours and other tours to see what's going on in the neighborhoods. Simply Living has organized some garden and simple living, sustainable living tours, which falls into that tradition. And we have some active bike groups. We've got another meetup coming up soon about bicycling and how it can change you. I think that the touring idea is a great way to plant seeds. People see what's going on that somebody else did, and even whether it's in their neighborhood or another neighborhood, and just that practical neighbor to neighbor experience that Jan talked about is something that we can, we're leveraging here, and the more the better.
Absolutely. Yeah, you might find some allies like bike shops, you know, might help you promote something like that, or the city should help promote these kinds of tours. The contact the local media. Nothing like having a couple TV cameras, you know, come and share the event with 100,000 other people.
That's right. So
I think we're almost at 8:30 right now.
yeah,
So.
we're pushing it, so we can wrap up if there are any more questions. We certainly appreciate Jan's focus on this big vision and doing it practically at the same time. That's really a great example of what we're trying, what I think everybody on the call is interested in. Certainly those of us, the guest responders are great examples of that. Joanne Dole, for example, organized a solar tour in her neighborhood, which included her house. You want to say anything about that, Joanne?
Well, let's see. Since we did the solar tour last summer, we have 2 more houses that have gotten solar. So I think we're on a roll.
Yeah, great. That's that neighbor to neighbor communication. May, do you have anything you've garnered over there in the YouTube world you want to share before we close it up?
No, we're all set here.
Okay, well, I want to thank everybody, and check out Jan's he's got the One Earth Lifestyle tomorrow, and that will be 10 o'clock our time. And
Here's Zoom info here.
yeah, so 3 hours time difference, but he's got some great resources that everybody knows now that participated in this call, and Simply Living will continue to do work in that same tradition. We're very much aligned with the vision that Jan has, including the concern about the consumer culture. We do not want to go back to business as usual. It's killing the planet. So I have a little more faith perhaps in the local markets, locally owned businesses, but finance capitalism at the global scale is the monopolies that have resulted in all the sectors of the economy have really been putting huge pressure on the environment, and we need to stop that, hopefully with an anti-monopoly focus soon. But we'll see, vote, and I want to again thank everybody, and I'll stop the recording, and people can let people know that we can learn from the encore recording. We'll put that out there and put it on the different social media. So thanks again, and
Okay.
I'll close it
Thanks,
up by
everyone.